I overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone whispering, "Just a few more months and everything will be ours." She hung up when she saw me and smiled sweetly. That same day, I called my private investigator and said, "Get everything." What he sent me the next morning made my blood run cold. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The words reached me from the hallway, a venomous whisper that sliced through the afternoon quiet. Just a few more months and everything will be ours. The voice was unmistakable. Chloe's. I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands submerged in warm, soapy water, washing the glass I had just used for sweet tea. The sunlight streamed through the window over the sink, illuminating the dancing motes of dust in the air. It was a Tuesday. A normal Tuesday. The clock on the microwave read 2:17 p.m. I did not move. I held the glass, feeling its smooth surface, and listened to the silence that followed the whisper. Then, the soft pad of footsteps on the hardwood floor approached. I began to rinse the glass, the water running clear. I placed it in the dish rack with deliberate care. "Ellie, you're still in here?" Chloe's voice was now its usual instrument of manufactured warmth. She appeared in the doorway, one hand resting on the frame. She wore a cream-colored sweater and dark jeans. Her blonde hair was perfectly smoothed. She smiled. It was a wide, bright smile that did not touch her eyes. I saw it now. I had always seen it, perhaps, but had chosen to file it away under generational differences or stress. Now that smile was a blade. "Just finishing up," I said. My own voice sounded distant to me, calm. "I thought I heard you on the phone." Her smile did not falter. It tightened, just at the corners. "Oh, just a client from the firm, nothing important." She waved a dismissive hand. The diamond on her wedding band, the one my son David had saved for 3 years to buy, caught the light. "I'm headed out to pick up the dry cleaning. Can I get you anything while I'm out?" "No, dear, thank you." She lingered for a moment, her eyes scanning my face. I turned back to the sink, wiping the already clean counter with a dish towel. I heard her heels click away, then the sound of the front door opening and closing. The lock engaged with a solid thunk. I stood there in the silent kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space. I looked at my hands, wrinkled and capable, resting on the Formica countertop my late husband Henry had installed 40 years ago. Everything will be ours. The house seemed to hold its breath around me. This house. The down payment scraped together from Henry's teacher's salary and my library wages. The wall where we penciled in David's height every birthday. The floor where my mother's oak dining table sat, polished to a soft glow. The garden out back, a tangle of my roses and Henry's tomatoes. Ours. A cold clarity settled over me, dense and heavy. It was not a rush of heat, not a gasp of shock. It was the slow, chilling recognition of a truth that had been presenting itself in small, ignored pieces. I walked into the living room. I sat in my armchair, the one with the floral print that had worn thin at the arms. I replayed the last year. Chloe's increased interest in my financial comfort, her gentle suggestions about the burdens of home ownership at your age. The casual questions about my will always framed as concern for David's future. The paperwork she'd brought for me to sign last month, just a beneficiary update for my 401k silly clerical thing that I'd asked to let my lawyer see first. The flash of irritation in her eyes, quickly masked by a laugh. "Of course, Ellie, always so careful." I had thought it was consideration, a daughter-in-law taking an interest. I felt a fool, a generous, trusting fool. I looked at the photograph on the mantel, David beaming in his graduation robe, his arm around me. His father had taken that picture. David's goodness was in his smile, open and unguarded. He worked long hours, building his career. He loved Chloe. He saw the performance she crafted for him, the devoted wife. The thought of his pain, when he learned, was a physical ache in my chest. But the thought of him being used as a tool to dismantle his own inheritance, that ignited something else. Just a few more months. She had a timeline. That meant she had a plan. And if she had a plan, she would have taken steps, forged documents, financial maneuvers, possibly a partner. I am a retired librarian. I know how to research. I know how to trace a thread through a labyrinth of information until you find the source. But this was not a reference question. This was my life. I stood up. I went to the small, neat desk in the corner of the living room where I paid bills. I opened the bottom drawer. Beneath a folder of old tax returns, I found a business card, slightly faded. Marcus Johnson. He had been the detective who handled the minor break-in at the library years ago. He had been kind, efficient, and respectful. He was retired from the force now, running a private investigations service. I had kept the card, a habit of filing potentially useful information. I took the card to the kitchen phone, the old corded one mounted on the wall. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times. Johnson Investigations. His voice was deeper than I remembered, but the cadence was the same. Mr. Johnson, this is Eleanor Covington. You assisted with an incident at the Jefferson Street Library several years ago. A brief pause. Mrs. Covington. Yes, I remember. What can I do for you? I looked out the window at my garden. The first rosebuds of the season were tight, closed fists. I believe someone is attempting to defraud me, to take my home and my assets. I need to know the full extent of it. I need evidence. There was another silence on the line. It was not judgmental. It was procedural. I can help you with that, he said finally. It would be best to speak in person. My office is discreet. We arranged a meeting for the following morning. I gave no details over the phone. After I hung up, I remained standing by the window. The cold dread that had entered my bones with the whisper was transforming. It was becoming a framework, a structure upon which I could build a defense. I thought of Chloe's smile, the sweet, empty smile that had just wished me a good afternoon. I replayed the whisper in my mind, fixing its exact tone, its conspiratorial softness. That moment in my sunny kitchen with the dishwater still warm was the end of one life and the beginning of another. I was no longer just Eleanor Covington, grandmother, retired librarian. I was the only person standing between my family's history and its erasure. I would have to act normal. I would have to serve sweet tea and smile at Sunday dinner. I would have to listen to her lies. The performance would be mine now. Every gracious word would be a piece of armor. Every concerned glance from her would be a data point. That evening, when David and Chloe came over for the casual dinner we'd planned, I was ready. I wore a soft blue sweater. I had made chicken pot pie, David's favorite. The house smelled of thyme and pastry. "Something feels different in here, Mom," David said, kissing my cheek. "You get a new plant?" "Just gave the ficus a good dusting," I said, smiling. My smile felt like a tool. I looked at Chloe. "How was your day, dear?" "Busy," she sighed, the picture of mild exasperation. "But good. I finalized those accounts I was telling you about." She met my eyes. Her gaze was clear, friendly, a perfect mask. "That's wonderful," I said, turning to stir the pot on the stove. "I'm sure you handled it perfectly." As we sat down to eat, I watched them. I saw David's easy affection for her. I saw her hand pat his, her laughter at his stories. I saw the performance, and for the first time, I saw the seams, the slight pause before her laughter, as if calculating the appropriate response, the way her eyes flicked to me when David was looking down at his plate, assessing, measuring. I ate my food. I tasted nothing. I filed every glance, every word. This was my research now. This was the primary source material. The betrayal was not a single knife wound. It was 1,000 paper cuts, each one drawing a minute amount of blood, each one teaching me about the sharpness of the edge. Later, after they left, I locked the door. I walked through each room of my house. I touched the door frame Henry had sanded smooth. I straightened the quilt my grandmother had made, draped over the back of the sofa. I stood in the doorway of David's old room, now a guest room, and remembered the sound of his childhood laughter. Everything will be ours. No, it would not. The morning after I called Marcus Johnson, I dressed with more care than usual. I chose a navy blue pantsuit, a strand of pearls, and low-heeled pumps. It was armor. I needed to look like a client who was serious, who was not a hysterical old woman jumping at shadows. I drove across town to his office, a standalone brick building that had once been a small insurance firm. The sign was discreet. The inside was clean and spare. A woman at a desk nodded me toward a closed door. I entered. Marcus Johnson stood up from behind a sturdy, uncluttered desk. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with close-cropped gray hair and a face that looked like it had seen every kind of weather. He wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks. His handshake was firm and brief. "Mrs. Covington, please have a seat." I sat in the leather chair opposite him. The room had a filing cabinet, 2 chairs, and a window with a view of a small parking lot. There were no personal photographs. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice." He nodded, sitting back down. "You said someone is attempting to defraud you. Tell me what you know. Start from the beginning." I did. I told him about the whisper. I listed the inconsistencies, the financial questions, the pressure about the house, the paperwork. I described Chloe, her charm, her ambition, her recent increase in what she called estate planning interest. I spoke for 10 minutes without interruption. My voice remained level. I presented it as a case file I was submitting for review. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, his hands steepled on the desk. "Your daughter-in-law, what is her full name and occupation?" "Chloe Covington. She is a commercial real estate leasing agent with Benton and Fuller." He wrote it down. "And your son, David, what is his position in this?" "He is unaware. I believe he is being manipulated. He is the primary beneficiary of my estate. I believe she is using him as a vector to gain control." "That is a serious allegation." "It is. That is why I am here. I need facts, not suspicions." He laid out his process. He would begin with a financial and background trace on Chloe. Discreetly, he would look for liens, outstanding debt, unusual banking activity. He would conduct surveillance to establish her patterns. He needed photographs of her, details of her car, her license plate. He explained his fees, his reporting structure. He would provide weekly updates in person at a location of my choosing. He recommended against phone calls or emails for anything substantive. "This will take time," he said, "and you will have to maintain absolute normalcy. Any change in your behavior could alert her. Can you do that?" "I have been maintaining normalcy for a year while my suspicions grew," I said. "I can continue." "It's different once you know for sure you're at war," he said, his eyes direct. "It wears on you." "I understand." We agreed on the terms. I wrote him a retainer check from my personal account, one not linked to any joint holdings with David. As I handed it to him, I felt a decisive click, like a lock engaging. There was no turning back. Driving home, the normalcy felt like a physical weight. I stopped at the grocery store and bought the items I usually would: milk, bananas, a loaf of whole wheat bread. I smiled at the cashier. I made small talk about the weather. All the while, a part of my mind was a detached observer, cataloging my own performance. When I arrived home, Chloe's car was in the driveway. A jolt of pure adrenaline went through me. I took a slow breath, gathered my grocery bag, and went inside. She was in the living room, looking at her phone. She looked up with that bright smile. "Ellie, I let myself in. I hope that's okay. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off those vitamin samples I told you about." A small bag sat on the coffee table. "That's thoughtful," I said, carrying the groceries to the kitchen. "I was just at the market." She followed me. She leaned against the doorway, watching me put things away. "You look nice. Big day?" "A meeting with the Library Historical Society," I said, the lie coming smoothly. We're planning the summer exhibit. Quite tedious, really. I turned and faced her. Did you need something, dear? Oh, no, just checking in. You seemed a little distracted at dinner last night. Is everything okay? This was a test. I met her gaze. Just tired. I didn't sleep well. Too much tea before bed, I think. Her expression softened into a mask of concern. You have to take care of yourself. I worry about you here all alone. It's a lot of house for one person. It's my home, I said, my voice pleasant. It's no trouble. She stayed for another 20 minutes, talking about nothing of consequence. Every word felt like a probe. I answered each one with benign, grandmotherly calm. When she finally left, I watched her car disappear down the street. My shoulders ached from the tension of holding them in a relaxed position. I went to the backyard, to my garden. It was my place of order. The rose bushes needed pruning. I fetched my shears and gloves from the shed. The physical work, the clear purpose of cutting away the dead wood to encourage new growth, steadied me. As I worked, I thought about Marcus Johnson's investigation. He would be digging into Chloe's life, turning over stones. What would he find? I realized I knew very little about her family, her past before David. She was from out of state. She spoke rarely of her childhood. When asked, she gave vague, polished answers about a middle-class upbringing in Ohio. David had met her at a conference. It had all seemed so modern and uncomplicated. Now, every omitted detail became a potential hiding place for the truth. Her effortless charm, which I had once admired as social grace, now seemed like a professional skill. A real estate agent is, after all, in the business of presentation and persuasion. That evening, I sat at my desk. I opened a fresh, leather-bound journal, a gift from David and Chloe last Christmas. I had found it too nice to use. Now it had a purpose. On the first page, I wrote the date and a single line. Initial consultation with MJ investigation commenced. I began to write in a precise, unhurried script. I recorded the time of Chloe's visit, her stated reason, the questions she asked. I described her demeanor. I wrote down the lie I had told about the library meeting. This journal would be my ledger, my parallel record of the facade. A few days later, Marcus called on the landline as prearranged, using the cover of a pollster. We set a meeting for the following afternoon at a public park 10 miles away. It was a large park with walking trails and benches. I arrived early and sat on a bench near a duck pond, wearing a sun hat and large sunglasses. He arrived 5 minutes later, dressed in khakis and a windbreaker. He sat beside me, not looking at me, instead watching the ducks. "I've begun the background check," he said, his voice low. "A few preliminary items. Chloe Covington has a significant number of hard credit inquiries in the last 18 months, more than what would be normal for her line of work. She also holds 2 personal credit cards at very high limits. The balances are near the maximum." I kept my eyes on the pond. Debt. Substantial and recently accrued. I'm tracing the expenditures now. It appears to be luxury goods, travel, boutique purchases, not medical or educational. There's also a pattern of cash withdrawals, regular and in round sums, that don't align with her reported income. Is she gambling? Not that I've seen yet. The cash could be for anything. It's a method of making transactions harder to follow. He paused. I also pulled the title on your house. It's clean, still solely in your name. No liens have been filed against it, yet. The word yet hung in the air between us. What is the next step? I asked. Surveillance. I need to establish her daily routine, see who she meets with outside of work and family. I'll need to follow her for a few days to get a baseline. Do I have your consent? You do. It may feel invasive, even for you, he warned. I am past that feeling, I said, and it was true. The cold clarity had solidified into a kind of grit. Find the pattern. We sat in silence for a moment. A child threw bread to the ducks, causing a noisy flurry. You're handling this well, he said, a statement of observation, not praise. What is the alternative? I said. I stood up, adjusting my hat. I will wait for your next report. I walked back to my car along the paved path. The sun was warm on my skin. I thought of Chloe's credit card debts, her secret cash withdrawals. They were pieces of a puzzle, but not the picture itself. Debt was a motive, but it was not the plan. The plan was in the whisper. Everything will be ours. Marcus was digging in the dirt, and he had found the first layer of rot. I knew he would keep digging until he hit the foundation, and I would be waiting, tending my garden, maintaining my normalcy, each day a careful step on the tightrope I now had to walk. The Sunday dinner tradition was one I had maintained for 30 years. It was a cornerstone, a ritual of family that survived Henry's passing and David's move to his own home. After my meeting with Marcus in the park, the approach of that Sunday felt like the advance of a tactical event. I planned the menu with strategic care. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, homemade rolls, green bean almondine, comfort food, familiar food. Nothing that would require unusual effort or suggest strain. David and Chloe arrived at 5 o'clock. David carried a bottle of wine. Chloe held a bakery box containing a pecan pie, store-bought. "I didn't have time to bake," she said, presenting it with a sigh. The open houses today were just relentless. "It's perfect," I said, taking the box. I noticed her glance around the front hallway, her eyes touching the small landscape painting, the antique hall table. It was not an admiring glance. It was an appraisal. We moved to the living room. David hugged me. His familiar scent of clean cotton and subtle cologne, a comfort that now also pained me. "Something smells amazing, Mom." "Just the usual," I said, smiling. "How was your week?" He launched into a story about a project at his engineering firm. I listened, nodding, while I watched Chloe. She sat on the sofa, one leg tucked under her, the picture of attentive relaxation. She smiled at David's jokes, her eyes fixed on him with a convincing glow of affection. When he described a problem with a design schematic, she leaned forward. "Baby, you always figure it out. You're the most thorough person I know." Her voice was a soft purr of support. She placed her hand on his knee. It was a small gesture, marital and normal. But I saw its function. It was a reinforcement, a reminder of her admiration, her loyalty. It kept him oriented toward her, trusting her perspective implicitly. David placed his hand over hers and smiled, the problem at work seemingly eased by her faith in him. "See," he said to me, "my personal cheerleader." "I see," I said, my smile fixed. During dinner, the manipulations became more evident. They were subtle, surgical. David mentioned a friend from college who was moving back to town. "Oh, what's his name again?" Chloe asked, tilting her head. Peter Milligan." Chloe's expression shifted to one of gentle, apologetic concern. "Peter. Right. David, didn't you say he had that issue with his business partner a few years back? The lawsuit?" David's brow furrowed. "Well, yeah, but that was settled. It wasn't really his fault." I know, Chloe said, waving her fork dismissively. "I just remember you said he could be a little dramatic. Maybe we should ease into that reunion. Your plate is so full right now." She turned to me. "David has been working so hard, Ellie. I have to protect his time or he'd never rest." "That's very considerate," I said. David looked slightly deflated. "Yeah, you're probably right. It's just, it'd be good to see him." "And we will," Chloe said, patting his arm. "Just not right now, when things calm down." She had effectively isolated him from a potential source of outside perspective, framing it as care for his well-being. The conversation turned to the house. It was Chloe who steered it there. "This roast is incredible, Ellie. You really keep this place humming. I don't know how you do it all alone." She took a sip of water. "You know, my client the other day, the one with the mother in St. Teresa's Gardens, she was telling me about their new assisted living wing. It's like a luxury hotel. Pool, activities, chef-prepared meals, all the maintenance handled. Her mother has never been happier or had more friends." The air at the table grew still. David looked up from his plate. "Mom's not ready for that," he said. but his voice lacked conviction. It was a statement, not a defense. "Oh, of course not," Chloe said, her eyes wide. "Goodness, I wasn't suggesting that. Not at all. I was just marveling at how much work Ellie does. It made me think, that's all. The option is there for someday, if it ever became a burden." She let the word hang, then quickly moved on. "More gravy, David." I cut a piece of roast. "The house is not a burden. It is a home. The work is a privilege." "Absolutely," Chloe said, her smile unwavering. "It's just so big. All these memories must be in every corner." Her tone was wistful, but the subtext was clear. The house was an artifact, a museum to a life that was passing. David was quiet for a moment. "It is a lot of house," he said, almost to himself. I felt a cold slice of betrayal, not from Chloe, that was expected, but from David. His words were not malicious. They were the first sign of the seed she had planted taking root. He was seeing the house through her lens: square footage, upkeep, potential equity, not as the living heart of his family. The rest of the meal passed with chatter about work, neighborhood news, trivialities. I played my part. I passed the roles. I laughed at the appropriate moments. I asked Chloe about her real estate deals, and she gave glossy, generic answers about market trends and client satisfaction. Every interaction was a layer of lacquer over the rotten wood beneath. After pie and coffee, David helped me clear the table. In the kitchen, as he scraped plates, he said, "She really cares about you, Mom. All her talking about St. Teresa's, it comes from a good place. She worries." I looked at my son, his kind face earnest in its confusion. "I know she does," I said, placing a hand on his arm, "but you must not worry. I am perfectly capable. This is where I belong." He nodded, but the doubt remained in his eyes. Chloe had done her work well. When they left with hugs and promises to call, I closed the door and leaned against it. The silence of the house was profound. The lingering smells of the meal, the faint echo of their voices, all of it felt contaminated. I walked through the dining room, clearing the last of the glasses. I ran my hand over the smooth surface of my mother's dining table, feeling the grooves and whorls in the old oak. I went to my desk and opened the journal. I wrote the date and the heading: Sunday Dinner Observation. Chloe's Tactics. 1. Isolation. Discouraging contact with old friend Peter under guise of protecting David's time. 2. Reframing. Characterizing the home as a potential burden, planting the concept of downsizing as an eventual inevitability, not a loss. 3. Leveraging affection, using physical touch and verbal praise to reinforce David's bond to her, making her his primary emotional compass. 4. Testing compliance. David expressed mild resistance to the assisted living concept. Chloe immediately retreated, but the idea was introduced. David's subsequent comment to me shows the idea has taken partial hold. My counter: maintained normalcy, reasserted my capability and attachment to the home without visible emotion, reinforced bond with David through physical touch, arm touch, and direct statement of belonging. I closed the journal. The analysis helped. It turned the sickening feeling in my stomach into data points on a chart. But the emotional truth was harder to dispel. Sitting at that table, surrounded by the people I loved most, I had never felt more alone. The betrayal was no longer just a threat to my property. It was a calculated campaign to reshape my son's perception of me, to turn my life's work into a problem he would eventually agree needed solving. I washed the dishes by hand, the hot water scalding my skin. The familiar routine was a grounding force. As I dried the last platter and put it away in the cupboard where it had always lived, I made a promise to myself. She was playing a long game, manipulating affections and perceptions. I would have to play a longer one. I would have to be more patient, more careful, and far, far smarter. The facade at dinner was just the opening move. The real game was just beginning, and I was no longer a piece on the board. I was the other player. The week after the Sunday dinner passed with a suspended quality. I performed my routines: grocery shopping, watering the garden, attending a book club meeting where I spoke about the novel without remembering a single word I said. My mind was a waiting room. Marcus had said he would have a preliminary report within 7 to 10 days. On the 8th day, he called in the early afternoon, using the pollster cover again, and suggested a meeting that evening. He named a time just after sunset. I prepared a pitcher of iced tea and carried it out to the back porch as the light began to soften. The porch was screened in, furnished with 2 rocking chairs and a small table. It faced my garden. I sat and waited, my hands folded in my lap. The cicadas began their evening song. I watched a hummingbird hover at the feeder, its movements frantic and precise. At the appointed time, I saw a figure come around the side of the house, through the gate from the driveway. Marcus. He was dressed in dark trousers and a plain shirt. He carried a slim, legal-sized envelope. He nodded to me as he stepped onto the porch. "Mrs. Covington." "Mr. Johnson, would you like some tea?" "No, thank you." He took the other rocking chair but did not rock. He placed the envelope on the table between us. "This is a summary of my initial findings. I'll walk you through it." "Please." He opened the envelope and withdrew several sheets of paper. They were printed documents, charts, and what looked like bank statements, with certain lines highlighted. First, the financials. Chloe Covington has approximately $87,000 in high-interest credit card debt spread across 4 cards. The spending pattern is consistent: designer apparel, luxury accessories, high-end spa charges, and 5-star hotel stays. Some of these trips were ostensibly for work, but the charges exceed any reasonable per diem. The debt has accumulated almost entirely in the last 22 months. The number was a physical weight. 87,000, I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, minimum payments are being made, but just barely. She is robbing Peter to pay Paul. Secondly, there are the cash withdrawals, regular sums of $1,000 to $2,000, withdrawn twice a month from an ATM near her office. That cash vanishes. It does not reappear in any of her known accounts. It could be used for anything untraceable, paying a confederate, private expenses, or holding liquid assets. He turned a page. Now, the more concerning activity. There have been 3 transfers from her personal checking account to an LLC called Crestview Holdings. The transfers total $25,000. Crestview Holdings is a newly formed corporate entity. Its listed agent is a lawyer I'm still looking into. The business address is a mailbox service. What is Crestview Holdings? On paper, it's a property investment firm. I haven't been able to trace its assets yet. But transferring personal funds to a corporate shell like this is unusual. It could be a way to move money, to invest in something, or to pay for services she doesn't want on her personal ledger. He set that page down. Finally, the background. Her employment history checks out, but her personal history has gaps. The middle-class Ohio story is thin. I found records of her in a different state during those years, living under her mother's maiden name for a period. There's a bankruptcy filing from 8 years ago, discharged. She has never disclosed this to your son, as far as I can tell from a search of their joint loan applications, where she answered no to prior bankruptcy. I looked out at the garden, now fading into blues and grays as the light failed. The hummingbird was gone. The numbers and facts arranged themselves in my mind like pieces of a grim puzzle. Debt, secret cash, shell companies, a hidden financial past. "The whisper she made," I said slowly. "Just a few more months and everything will be ours." The debt suggests desperation. The transfers suggest an active plan. She is not just spending, she is funding something. "That is my assessment," Marcus said. "The debt creates a powerful motive. The cash and the LLC suggest operational planning. The question is the endpoint. What is everything?" "My house, my savings, my son's inheritance," I said. "She needs to gain control of the assets to solve her debt and likely secure a larger payout. The timeline implies she believes she is close to a triggering event." A triggering event. Marcus repeated, nodding. That could be a legal maneuver, declaring you incompetent, forging a power of attorney, pressuring you to sign a reverse mortgage or a deed transfer. The Sunday dinner conversation you documented aligns with that, laying the groundwork to frame your home as a burden, your independence as a concern. I picked up the summary page, looking at the columns of numbers. They were not abstractions. They were the quantified value of her deception, the cost of her secret life. The coldness of the data was somehow worse than the heat of anger. It was irrefutable. "What is the next phase of your investigation?" I asked. "I need to identify the principals behind Crestview Holdings. I need to surveil her and see if she meets with anyone connected to it. I also want to trace the destination of that cash. That will require more time and closer observation." "You have my consent," I said. I placed the papers back on the table. "This confirms the threat. It defines its scale. Thank you." Marcus gathered the documents and placed them back in the envelope. He handed it to me. "These are for your records. Keep them secure." I took the envelope. It felt heavy. "I will." He stood to leave. "Be aware, Mrs. Covington, that confirmation often increases the sense of risk. You know for sure now. The game has changed." "I know," I said. I did not stand. The game changed the moment I heard the whisper. "This just shows me the board." He gave a short nod and left the way he came, melting into the deepening twilight. I sat on the porch as full dark fell. I did not turn on the light. I held the envelope in my hands. Later, inside at my desk, under the pool of light from my green-shaded lamp, I opened my journal. I created a new section, Financial Evidence. I transcribed the key figures. $87,000 in debt. Cash withdrawals, $1,000 to $2,000 twice monthly. Transfers to Crestview Holdings, $25,000 total, prior bankruptcy. I wrote a line below the figures. Motive established. Method in development. Endgame, acquisition of estate. The numbers were cold facts. They were the bones of the plot. My initial humiliation, the feeling of being a fool, was gone. In its place was a crystalline resolve. This was no longer a family misunderstanding. It was a financial siege, and I was now in possession of the enemy's supply lines. I knew her weakness, the debt. I knew her tool, the shell company. I did not yet know her partner or her exact play, but I had the first real coordinates. I locked the envelope in the small fireproof box I kept on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, behind a stack of sweaters. Then I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I stood at the sink, looking out at the black square of the backyard. The house was silent, but it no longer felt like a target. It felt like a fortress for which I now had the first set of blueprints. The fear was still there, but it had been joined by something else. The steady, quiet pulse of strategy. The war was not just emotional anymore. It was documented. It was in the ledger, and I was starting to learn the language. Marcus called 2 days later. His voice on the phone was carefully neutral, but he said the words I had been waiting for. "I have identified a principal. We should meet." We arranged for the following morning at the main public library in the periodicals section on the second floor. It was a place where I was a familiar face and where two people sitting at a table would attract no attention. I arrived early and selected a table near a window overlooking the parking lot. I spread out a copy of the Historical Society newsletter I had brought with me. At exactly 10 o'clock, I saw Marcus enter the section. He carried a manila folder and a laptop case. He nodded slightly as he approached and took the seat opposite me, placing the folder on the table. "Thank you for meeting here," I said. "Sensible location," he replied. He opened the folder. Inside were several grainy but clear photographs printed on standard paper. The first was a picture of Chloe, taken from a distance, walking into a sleek modern office building downtown. The sign on the building read, Van Buren Properties. 3 days ago, I observed Mrs. Covington meeting with an individual at this building. Marcus said in a low, even tone. He slid another photograph toward me. It showed Chloe standing in a parking garage, speaking with a man in a tailored suit. He was tall, with dark hair slicked back, and he was gesturing with one hand. Chloe was nodding, her expression intense, focused. It was not the social, smiling mask she wore at my home. This was a business expression. "Who is he?" I asked. "His name is Robert Vance. He is the founder and managing partner of Van Buren Properties, a real estate development firm. They specialize in urban revitalization, buying up older properties in transitioning neighborhoods, renovating them, and selling them at a significant profit. They have been aggressive in several areas adjacent to yours." The name clicked into place with a cold, final sound. I had seen it before. I looked at the man's face in the photograph, his confident posture. I know this name. There was an article in the local paper a few months ago, a feature on developers. He was quoted talking about unlocking the potential of underutilized assets held by aging homeowners. There was community pushback. He argued he was providing modern housing solutions. "That's him," Marcus confirmed. "Now look at this." He placed a third document on the table. It was a printout of a corporate registration record, Crestview Holdings. The LLC your daughter-in-law has been funding is registered to a law firm. That law firm represents Robert Vance in multiple business matters. Crestview is a shell, a holding company. I believe it is the vehicle they intend to use to acquire your property. I stared at the documents, the photographs, the corporate record. The separate pieces of the puzzle, the debt, the cash, the LLC, snapped together into a single coherent picture. It was not just a vague scheme. It was a specific business plan, and I was the asset. "Explain the mechanism," I said, my voice barely a whisper in the quiet library. "The pattern fits a known model," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly. "The goal is to gain control of your home. Given your age and your apparent attachment to the property, a direct sale to a developer like Vance would be unlikely. So they need to create a scenario where you are no longer in a position to refuse. The most common methods are through a declaration of diminished capacity, granting a power of attorney to a family member, likely your son, under his wife's influence, or by pressuring you into a managed care facility, freeing the asset for sale. Once control is obtained, the property would be sold to Crestview Holdings for below market value. Crestview would then immediately transfer it to Van Buren Properties for development. The profit would be split, clearing Chloe's debts and providing a windfall." "And my son?" I asked, the words sticking in my throat. "He is the key to the legal access," Marcus said, his tone professional but not unkind. "If they can convince him that moving you is in your best interest, or if they can get him to agree to a power of attorney due to fabricated concerns about your mental state, he would be the one signing the papers. He would likely be told the sale is to fund your care, or that it's a simple investment. He would not see the behind-the-scenes transfer. By the time he realized, it would be done." I looked out the window. The sun was shining on the cars in the lot. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning. Inside this quiet room, I was learning the precise dimensions of the trap being built for me. It was not a crime of passion. It was a corporate raid. "The whisper," I said. "Just a few more months. She needs to escalate. She needs to force the issue before her debt becomes unsustainable. What is the timeline?" Based on the financial pressure, I would estimate she needs to execute within the next 60 to 90 days. The meeting with Vance suggests they are in the operational phase. They are coordinating. I gathered the photographs and documents, stacking them neatly. My hands were steady. "I need copies of all of this." "I have a set for you." He handed me a second identical manila folder from his laptop case. "This is everything. The photos, the corporate links, Vance's background, and a timeline of their meetings over the past 4 months. They have been planning this for a while." I took the folder and placed it in my own tote bag next to my newsletter. The weight of it was insignificant, but its contents were monumental. "What is your recommendation now?" "You have two choices," he said. "You can go to the authorities with what we have. It is largely circumstantial for a criminal case, but it might create enough noise to scare them off. Or you can begin to fortify your legal and financial position so that when they make their move, they hit a wall. Given their timeline, the fortification would need to be immediate and comprehensive." I already knew the answer. Scaring them off would not bring justice. It would only send them looking for another target. It would leave the poison in my family undrained. "We fortify," I said. He gave a single nod. "Then your next steps are legal. You need to see your attorney. Update your will with ironclad, irrevocable trusts. Secure your financial accounts. Document your mental competency with a physician. Make it impossible for them to use the standard avenues of coercion." "I understand." We sat in silence for a moment. The hum of the library's HVAC system was the only sound. The full scope of the conspiracy was now laid bare. It was not just my daughter-in-law's greed. It was a partnership with a professional predator. They saw my home, my history, as an underutilized asset. They saw me as an obstacle to be cleared. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson," I said, standing up. "Your work has been essential." "It's not finished," he said, also rising. "I'll continue surveillance. We need to know the moment they decide to act." I walked out of the library into the bright morning. The folder in my bag felt like a shield. Now I knew the enemy, not just his mask, but his name, his business, his method. The vague dread had crystallized into a known quantity: Robert Vance of Van Buren Properties. Chloe was not just a spendthrift, she was a point person in a hostile takeover. I drove home, but I did not go inside immediately. I sat in my car in the driveway looking at my house. The wraparound porch Henry had painted the summer David turned 10. The flower boxes I filled with petunias every spring. It was not an underutilized asset. It was a life. And they had a spreadsheet somewhere with a projected profit column next to its address. The shock was gone. In its place was a cold, focused clarity. This was no longer a personal betrayal to be mourned. It was a business problem to be solved. And I was now in possession of their entire business plan. I went inside, placed the new folder in my fireproof box next to the first, and then I picked up the phone. I dialed the number of my attorney, Franklin Ross, who had handled Henry's estate. His receptionist answered. "This is Eleanor Covington," I said. "I need to schedule an urgent appointment with Mr. Ross to review and update my estate planning documents. Yes, as soon as possible." Franklin Ross's office was in a quiet, brick-faced building downtown. The waiting room had dark wood panels and leather chairs. I had been there last after Henry's death. The receptionist showed me directly into his office. Franklin stood up from behind a large desk. He was a man in his late 60s, with a neatly trimmed white beard and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ellie," he said, coming around to shake my hand. "It's good to see you. Please sit. You said the matter was urgent." I took the chair opposite his desk. "It is, Franklin. I need to make significant, irrevocable changes to my estate plan. I need to secure my assets from a specific threat." He sat down, steepling his fingers. "Explain the threat." I opened the folder I had brought containing the key financial summaries Marcus had provided and a single photograph of Chloe with Robert Vance. I slid it across the desk. "My daughter-in-law, Chloe, is conspiring with this man, a developer named Robert Vance, to gain control of my home and finances. She has substantial secret debt. They have a corporate vehicle set up for the acquisition. Their plan, I believe, is to have me declared incompetent or to pressure me into a care facility, then sell the property through this shell company." Franklin picked up the photograph, studied it, then read the financial summary. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes grew hard. "This is serious." "It is. I have a private investigator who compiled this. I need legal walls they cannot breach. My primary concern is my son, David. He is unaware. He may be manipulated, but he is not malicious. I want everything to go to him, but I need to ensure Chloe cannot access it, directly or indirectly, under any circumstances. He nodded slowly, setting the papers down. We can do that. The cornerstone will be an irrevocable trust. Upon your passing, all assets, the house, investments, everything, will pour into the trust. David will be the sole beneficiary. He can receive distributions for his health, education, maintenance, and support, but the principal will be managed by an independent trustee, which we can designate as a bank or a trusted third party. This prevents him from being pressured to liquidate assets or sign them over. What about during my lifetime? I asked. If they attempt to get a power of attorney? We will update your durable power of attorney and healthcare directive, naming someone other than David or Chloe. I would suggest a professional fiduciary or perhaps a trusted friend. This severs their legal pathway to control while you are alive. We will also have you undergo a competency evaluation with a physician I trust. We will document that you are of sound mind, making these changes voluntarily and with full understanding. That creates a contemporaneous medical record to counter any future claims of incapacity. I want the house specifically protected, I said. It cannot be sold or mortgaged without the trustee's approval, and only for David's direct benefit, not for debt service or general support. We can write that in as a special provision. We can also include a no contest clause. If Chloe or anyone acting on her behalf challenges the will or the trust, they are automatically disinherited and receive nothing. Do it, I said. He made notes on a legal pad. We'll also need to address your current financial accounts. I recommend we move any liquid assets into accounts that require 2 signatures for large withdrawals, yours and the fiduciary's. We can also retitle the house. Putting it in the name of a living trust now would provide another layer of protection and avoid probate, but it would be a matter of public record. Given the developer's involvement, they may be monitoring property records. I considered this. Let's do it, a living trust. If they see it, it sends a message that the asset is no longer simply mine to be pressured into selling. It is a locked box. Good, Franklin said. I will draft the documents. It will take a few days. We will need to execute them formally with witnesses and a notary. I will arrange for the physician to see you here, in my office on the same day, to create a clear chain of evidence. Thank you, Franklin. Ellie, he said, his voice softening slightly. This is a severe step. Irrevocable means irrevocable. You are ceding a degree of control. You're sure? I am sure. The control I am ceding is an illusion they were planning to steal anyway. This way, I choose where it goes. I choose the locks. 2 days later, I returned to his office. A doctor, an older woman named Dr. Evans, met with me privately in a conference room for 45 minutes. She asked me a series of questions: the date, the current president, to count backward from 100 by sevens, to explain the meaning of common proverbs. She asked me why I was making these changes. I told her, in a factual manner, about the threat. She took notes. At the end, she signed a letter stating I was mentally competent, under no apparent duress, and fully understood the nature and consequences of my legal decisions. Then, in Franklin's presence, with 2 paralegals as witnesses, I signed the stack of documents: the last will and testament, the irrevocable trust agreement, the updated durable power of attorney, naming a professional fiduciary service Franklin recommended, the updated advanced healthcare directive, the deed transfer into the name of the Eleanor Covington Living Trust. I signed my name over and over. The pen made a soft scratching sound on the heavy paper. Each signature felt like the driving of a nail into a secure, fortified structure. I was not just giving things away, I was placing them beyond reach. The house was no longer merely mine. It was an asset of the trust, its future stewarded for my son. My money was no longer a temptation in a joint account. It was behind a dual signature wall. My legal and medical agency was no longer a potential vector for coercion. It was assigned to a disinterested professional. When it was done, Franklin gave me copies of everything in a thick blue binder. "Keep this secure," he said. "The originals are in my vault. The trust is now active. The walls are up." That night, I sat at the desk in my study. The house was quiet. I opened my journal to a new page. I wrote the date and a header: "Legal fortifications completed." I listed the documents I had signed. I noted the name of the fiduciary, the trust number, the date of the competency evaluation. I filed the business card for the fiduciary service with my papers. I then wrote a separate, longer entry. I detailed the entire conspiracy as I understood it: Chloe's debt, her meetings with Robert Vance, the purpose of Crestview Holdings. I stated my reasons for the legal changes. I wrote that my son, David Covington, was loved and was to be protected from his wife's actions. I wrote that I was of sound mind and taking these steps voluntarily to preserve my family's legacy from a predatory scheme. I signed and dated the entry. This journal was no longer just a record of observations. It was a testament. If anything happened to me, if any question was raised, this narrative, alongside the legal documents and the evidence from Marcus, would tell the true story. I closed the journal and locked it in my desk drawer. I looked around the study, at the shelves of books, the framed photographs of my family. The atmosphere was the same quiet, the same familiar shadows. But its nature had changed. I was no longer a vulnerable occupant. I was the steward of a fortified estate. The emotional storm of betrayal had passed. In its wake was a landscape of clear, deliberate lines. The law was now my ally, codifying my will into a form that could not be bent or broken by whispers or forgeries. The next move was theirs, but the board was no longer what they thought. The asset they coveted was now guarded by trusts and trustees, by medical affidavits and legal clauses. They were still playing checkers. I had quietly begun a game of chess, and for the first time since the whisper, I felt not just resolve, but a calm, strategic patience. Let them make their play. They would find the door locked, the windows barred, and the title to everything they wanted held in the name of a trust they could never touch. With the legal walls secured, I entered a period of deliberate waiting. I tended my garden. I attended my book club. I visited the library. I performed the routines of Eleanor Covington as if nothing had changed. But I was no longer just watching. I was measuring the pressure in the atmosphere, waiting for the storm their timeline demanded. Marcus provided regular, concise updates. Chloe's meetings with Robert Vance had increased to twice a week. The cash withdrawals continued. The debt was static, meaning she was likely making minimum payments from the cash, a stopgap measure. The pressure was building on her end. They needed to act soon. It was time to give them an opening, a controlled one. I began the operation on a Thursday. I called David at work, something I rarely did. When he answered, I let my voice sound weary, slightly unfocused. "David, it's your mother." "Mom, is everything okay?" I'm not sure. I've been feeling a bit off all day. Dizzy. I must have misplaced my reading glasses again. I've looked everywhere." I allowed a faint tremor to enter the words. "Are you at home? Do you need me to come over?" No, don't be silly. I'm sure it's nothing. I just wanted to hear your voice. I'll be fine." I paused. Maybe don't mention this to Chloe. I don't want to worry her." That evening, David called me back. His voice was tight with concern. "Mom, I've been thinking. You shouldn't be alone if you're feeling dizzy. Maybe we should have someone come check on you." "I'm perfectly fine now, David. It was just a spell." But the seed was planted. I knew he would tell Chloe. He was programmed to tell Chloe everything, especially concerns about me. 2 days later, Chloe arrived unannounced. I was in the living room, ostensibly trying to balance my checkbook with papers spread somewhat haphazardly on the coffee table. I had put on a house dress I rarely wore, one that looked slightly rumpled. I did not put on my usual lipstick. "Ellie, David said you weren't feeling well." She stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the room, taking in the disarray of papers. Her expression was a masterpiece of solicitous care. "Oh, Chloe, I didn't expect you. I'm all right. Just a little tired. This checkbook is giving me fits. The numbers seem to jump around." I gestured vaguely at the papers. She came and sat beside me on the sofa, placing a cool hand on my forehead in a theatrical gesture. "You don't feel feverish. Have you eaten today? You look pale." I had some toast. "That's not enough." She stood. "Let me make you some tea, and let's get this organized." She began to neatly stack my papers, her movements efficient. I watched her from beneath lowered eyelids. She was assessing, cataloging. The performance of vulnerability was having its intended effect. Over the next week, I leaned into the role. I forgot a lunch date with a friend, requiring the friend to call Chloe when I didn't show up. I asked Chloe to repeat simple things I had just been told, pretending a lapse in attention. I let the garden go slightly, allowing a few visible weeds to sprout. Each sign was small, plausible, a brushstroke in a portrait of gradual decline. Marcus confirmed the bait was taken. Chloe and Vance met for a long lunch. Afterwards, she visited a print shop, not her usual office supply store. The pieces were moving. The culmination came on a Tuesday afternoon. Chloe arrived with a file folder and a determined kindness in her eyes. "Ellie, we need to talk. I'm worried about you." "There's no need to worry, dear," I said, sitting in my armchair. I made my hands rest loosely in my lap, a picture of passive acceptance. But there is. She sat on the ottoman facing me, leaning forward. "The dizzy spell, the confusion with your accounts, forgetting appointments. David and I are concerned. We think you might be trying to do too much. This house, the bills, it's a lot for anyone." "I've managed for years," I said, my voice soft without its usual edge of authority. "I know, and you've done an amazing job, but things change. We want to help you." She opened the folder. "I've spoken to a wonderful elder care attorney, a friend of a client. He's drawn up some simple documents that would let David and me help you more. Just temporary measures to take the burden off while you get your strength back." She extracted a few sheets of paper. I could see the words, "Durable Power of Attorney," at the top of one. Another appeared to be a medical directive form. A third looked like a generic property management agreement. "What are these?" I asked, feigning mild confusion. "This one," she said, pointing to the power of attorney, "just lets David help with your finances if you're not feeling up to it. Pay bills, manage investments. This one is about your healthcare wishes. And this," she tapped the property agreement, "is just so we can hire a service to help with the yard and maintenance, so you don't have to think about it. You just need to sign here and here." She indicated signature lines with her perfectly manicured finger. I picked up the power of attorney document, holding it as if it were heavy. I scanned the text. It was broad, giving an attorney in fact, which she had pre-filled as David, sweeping authority over all financial and property matters. It did not look like a standard form. The font was slightly off, and the wording in one clause was ambiguous enough to allow for property sale without a separate court order. It was, I was almost certain, a forgery. A created document meant to look official. "It's a lot to read," I murmured, letting the paper drift back to my lap. "It's all standard language, Ellie. The attorney assured me it's just to protect you." Her voice was a soothing balm, but her eyes were fixed on the signature lines. "We can have David come over tonight. We can all sign together as a family. Then you won't have to worry about a thing." I looked from the papers to her face, to the eager concern etched there. The mask was perfect, but the hunger beneath was palpable. She was so close to what she wanted. She could taste it. I'm very tired, Chloe," I said, letting my shoulders slump. "Could we do this another day? My head is pounding. I just need to lie down." A flash of impatience crossed her features, so quick it was almost invisible. She smoothed it into gentle understanding. Of course. You rest. We can do it tomorrow or the next day, whenever you're feeling stronger." She gathered the papers, her movements less smooth than before. "I'll just leave these with you so you can look them over. I'll check on you in the morning." She left the folder on the coffee table. After she left, I waited until I heard her car pull away. Then I got up. The weariness fell from me. I walked to the desk, took out my phone, and took clear, well-lit photographs of each page of each document. I texted the images to Marcus with a single line: "The bait has been taken. Documents presented for signature today." I returned to the armchair. I did not look at the forged papers. I looked out the window at the late afternoon light on my garden. A calm, cold satisfaction settled within me. The trap I had set by feigning weakness had worked perfectly. She had shown me her hand. She had presented the forged key to my kingdom, and I had just documented it, without her knowing. The initiative had shifted. She was now reacting to my performance. I had drawn her into the open. The next move was still hers. She would return, eager to secure the signatures. But I now held the evidence of her intent to defraud. The game was entering its final phase. I picked up the folder, placed it in my desk drawer, and locked it. It was not a threat. It was a trophy. The morning after Chloe presented the documents, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Marcus, a brief update that the papers were in my possession and that I expected increased pressure. The second was to my friends, Alma and Joyce. We had been a trio for 45 years since our children were in preschool together. I did not explain over the phone. I simply said, "I need your eyes and your ears. Can you come over this afternoon? It's important." They arrived at 2 o'clock. Alma, a retired nurse, practical and sharp-eyed. Joyce, a former school administrator whose warmth hid a spine of steel. I had set out iced tea and lemon cake on the backyard patio table. The garden was in full, orderly bloom, a contrast to the disorder I was about to describe. We made small talk for exactly 5 minutes. Then Alma put down her glass. "All right, Ellie, spill it. You've got that look. The one you had when Henry was in the hospital and you were holding it all together for David." I took a breath. I am being targeted by Chloe. She is working with a developer to take the house and my money. The air stilled. Joyce's hand paused on her napkin. "Explain." For the next 20 minutes, I laid it out. I spoke in clear, factual sequences. The whisper, the hiring of Marcus, the debt, the meetings with Robert Vance, the forged power of attorney papers now sitting in my desk. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I presented it as a case study. I showed them the photographs Marcus had provided, the financial summary, the images of the documents Chloe wanted me to sign. When I finished, there was a long silence. Alma picked up the photograph of Chloe and Vance. "This weasel, I've seen his signs, Van Buren Properties, your future today. Slaps them on lawns of empty houses, vulture." Joyce took the financial summary, her eyes scanning the numbers. $87,000, and she brings you forged papers. "Ellie, this is beyond family drama. This is criminal." "I know," I said. "My legal protections are in place. The house is in a trust. My assets are locked. But the personal confrontation is coming. She will return for the signatures. When she realizes she cannot get them, or when she discovers the legal walls, her behavior may become unpredictable. I need witnesses. I need people who can watch, who can listen, who can testify if necessary that I am in full possession of my faculties and that she is the one acting improperly." Alma leaned forward. "What do you need us to do?" "Be present. Visit more often. If you're here, she is less likely to try anything extreme. Listen to what she says. Remember it. If she speaks to you about me, about my decline, note the exact words. You are my sister circle. You are my early warning system and my character witnesses." Joyce nodded slowly. "She's been working on David, hasn't she? Isolating him." "Yes. The Sunday dinner you attended last month, where she talked about St. Teresa's Gardens, that was a test run. She is framing the house as a burden and my independence as a concern." That little Alma bit off the word. I knew there was a slickness to her, too polished, everything a performance. We'll be your eyes and ears, Ellie. Consider it done. Joyce reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her grip was firm. You should know, there's talk in the neighborhood, just murmurs. Betty Lewis from 3 streets over said a very polite young man from a property investment company came to her door, asking if she'd ever considered the value of her home, if she had plans for the future. She said no, of course, but it struck her as pushy. Van Buren Properties, I said. Likely. They're scouting. They have your address circled, but they're checking the surrounding blocks, too. This isn't just about you. It's about the whole street, the whole neighborhood. This was new information, and it solidified the picture further. Vance wasn't just after one house. He was assembling a parcel. My home was the keystone. Then we protect more than just my home, I said. We protect the neighborhood, quietly. If anyone mentions these inquiries to you, encourage them to say no, to not engage. Have them take the person's card and give it to me. We spent the next hour developing a simple routine. Alma would stop by on Mondays and Wednesdays, always with a plausible reason, returning a book, bringing soup, asking for gardening advice. Joyce would come on Fridays, often inviting me for a walk, creating a public display of my activity and mobility. Their presence would be regular, visible, and a natural barrier. What about the confrontation? Joyce asked. You can't avoid her forever. I don't intend to, I said. I will confront her. But on my terms, in my house, when I am ready, I have all the evidence. I need her to state her intentions clearly, in a controlled setting. Your role will be to ensure that afterward there is no question of my state of mind, that you saw me calm, collected, and in command. Alma gave a grim smile. We'll be your backup. Not in the room, but right outside. You say the word. The meeting shifted then, from strategy to sustenance. We ate the lemon cake. We talked about Joyce's grandson, about Alma's new rose bushes. The conversation was normal, but the undercurrent was different. A fierce, protective loyalty had been activated. I was not alone in this house. I had a network. After they left, the atmosphere of the house felt altered, lighter, somehow. The silence was no longer the silence of solitary vigilance. It was the quiet of a guarded space. That evening, I made an entry in my journal. Alliance formalized with A and J roles established. Neighborhood scouting activity confirmed. Vance is parcel building. My home is the primary target. A few days later, the new routine began. Alma came over on Monday with a container of tomato seedlings. Figured your garden could use some more, she said loudly at the front door, ensuring any watching neighbors would hear. Once inside, she peered out the front window. Black sedan down the street. Has been there for 20 minutes. Could be nothing. Could be your PI. Could be someone else. Noted, I said. We drank tea in the kitchen, and she told me about a cousin who had been pressured into a reverse mortgage. The stories were everywhere, once you knew to listen. Joyce came on Friday, and we walked around the block at a brisk pace. She waved at neighbors, stopped to chat with Mr. Henderson about his begonias. It was a performance of normalcy and community connection. I played my part, asking after grandchildren, commenting on the weather. Every interaction was a stitch in the fabric of my visible, engaged life. When I returned home, there was a voicemail from Chloe. Her voice was syrup. Ellie, just thinking about you, wondering if you'd had a chance to look over those papers. David and I would love to come by this weekend and help you get everything sorted. No pressure, just let me know. I deleted the message without saving it. The pressure was mounting on her end. The timeline was squeezing. My allies were in position. The forged documents were locked away. Every piece was where it needed to be. The feeling of isolation was gone, replaced by the quiet strength of a prepared position. I was no longer just defending. I was drawing the battle lines, and I had chosen the ground. My home was not just a house, it was the center of a community, and that community, in the form of 2 steadfast women, now stood with me. I called Chloe the next morning. My voice was calm, devoid of the previous week's feigned weakness. "Chloe, could you come over today? We need to talk about those papers, alone." There was a brief pause on the other end, then her practiced, warm tone. "Of course, Ellie. Is everything all right? Should I bring David?" "No, just you. 2:00. At 1:55, I was in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had heard the whisper. Sunlight streamed through the same window over the sink. I had laid nothing out on the table. I simply stood, waiting. At 2:03, her car pulled into the driveway. I watched through the window as she walked to the door, her steps quick and confident. She was carrying the same leather folder. She believed she was coming to collect. I opened the door before she could knock. "Come in, Chloe." She smiled, that bright, empty smile. "You look better today." "More rested." She stepped inside, her eyes darting around, looking for the documents she'd left. "Let's sit in the kitchen," I said, leading the way. I did not offer tea. I took my usual seat at the head of the table. She sat to my right, placing her folder on the table. "So," she began, leaning forward with concern, "have you had a chance to look everything over? I know legal jargon can be so confusing." "I have looked them over," I said, my hands resting flat on the table. "I have also had them analyzed. They are forgeries, Chloe. The power of attorney document is not a standard form. The clauses are designed to allow for the sale of property without court oversight. The signature line for the witness is blank. Did you plan to forge that as well?" Her smile froze. It did not fall. It became rigid, a porcelain mask. I don't know what you mean. These are from a reputable attorney." "Which attorney? Provide the name and bar number." "I will call him right now." I gestured to the phone on the wall. Her eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me. The concern in them began to curdle into something else. "Ellie, this is paranoia. This is what David and I have been worried about. You're seeing conspiracies." "No," I said, my voice level. "I am seeing facts. I know about the $87,000 in credit card debt, the luxury purchases, the hotel stays. I know about the cash withdrawals, $2,000 twice a month, that disappear. I know about the $25,000 you transferred to Crestview Holdings, which is a shell company for Robert Vance of Van Buren Properties." Her face lost all its color. The mask cracked, revealing the stark shock beneath. She said nothing. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. I continued, each statement a measured, precise blow. "I have photographs of you meeting with Robert Vance in the parking garage of his office. I have the corporate records linking Crestview to his law firm. I know the plan. You are to gain control of this house through David or through a declaration of my incompetence, sell it to Crestview for below market value, who will immediately flip it to Vance. The profit clears your debt and pays your partner. Just a few more months and everything will be ours." Those were your words, in this hallway. Her breath came in a short, sharp gasp. The veneer of the perfect daughter-in-law evaporated. What was left was raw, exposed panic. You had me followed." "I had the truth uncovered," I corrected. "You were not followed. You were investigated. Your financial crimes and your conspiracy to commit fraud were documented." She pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping loudly on the floor. "You have no proof of any crime. Those are private documents. They are evidence of intent. The forged power of attorney is evidence of attempted fraud. The financial transfers while you are insolvent could be construed as fraudulent conveyance. I have copies of everything. My attorney has copies. A private investigator has copies." Her panic was morphing into rage. Her eyes, usually so wide and warm, narrowed into slits. "You vindictive old woman, you were pretending. All that weakness, that confusion. It was an act. It was a test. You failed it. You saw vulnerability and you moved in for the kill with forged documents. You confirmed every suspicion." She stood up, her body trembling. "This is my life. You have no idea the pressure I'm under. This house. It's just a house. You're sitting on a gold mine doing nothing with it while I'm drowning. David would never understand. I needed this. You do not get to solve your problems by stealing my life, I said, remaining seated. My calm was a wall against her fury. This is not a house. It is my home. It is David's inheritance. It is not your personal ATM. David loves me. He would choose me over you and this museum, she spat, her voice rising to a shout. That may be, I said, still quiet, but he will not be choosing between you and a museum. He will be choosing between you and the truth. And I have all of it. Every transfer, every meeting, every forged signature line. She stared at me, her chest heaving. The elegant, controlled woman was gone. In her place was a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. What do you want? Money? Is that it? I can get you some money. Vance would pay something to make this go away. I want nothing from you or Robert Vance. I want you to leave this house. I want you to tell David the truth, or I will. And I want you to understand that every legal and financial avenue you might attempt is now closed. The house is in an irrevocable trust. My assets are secured. My competency is medically documented. Your scheme is over. The finality of the words seemed to physically strike her. She swayed on her feet. The rage drained, replaced by a hollow, stunned realization. She had played her hand, and she had lost everything. The debt remained. Vance would abandon her. David. The front door opened, the sound of a key in the lock, footsteps in the hallway. "Mom, you home? Chloe's car is outside." David's voice called out. Chloe's eyes flew to mine, wide with terror. The confrontation was no longer private. The reckoning had arrived, and it was walking down the hall toward us. I looked from her terrified face to the kitchen doorway where my son's shadow now fell across the floor. The final act was beginning, and I was ready. David stood in the kitchen doorway, his work bag still slung over his shoulder. His eyes moved from my face, which was calm, to Chloe's, which was a mask of pure panic. The air in the room was thick with the words I had just spoken, still hanging there. "What's going on?" David asked, his voice cautious. "Chloe? Mom?" Chloe found her voice first, a frantic, trembling sound. "David, she's having some kind of episode. She's accusing me of terrible things. She's not well." I did not move. I looked at my son. "I am perfectly well, David. Please come in and sit down. There is something you need to see." He walked slowly into the kitchen, dropping his bag by the table. He pulled out a chair and sat, looking back and forth between us. "See what?" I stood up and went to the desk in the living room. I retrieved the blue binder from Franklin Ross and the manila folder from Marcus Johnson. I placed them on the kitchen table between us. Chloe's eyes locked on the folders as if they were poisonous. "Chloe has been conspiring with a real estate developer named Robert Vance to gain control of this house and my savings," I began, my tone that of a librarian presenting a research summary. "She has accumulated $87,000 in secret credit card debt. She's been transferring money to a shell company used by Vance. Their plan was to have me declared incompetent or pressured into a care facility, then sell the property." David stared at me, his expression one of pure disbelief. "Mom, that's insane. Chloe, tell her." Chloe reached for his hand. "David, baby, listen to me. She's confused. She's been forgetting things, getting dizzy. She's fabricated all this." I opened Marcus's folder. I slid the financial summary across the table. Then the photograph of Chloe and Vance in the parking garage. Then the corporate registration linking Crestview Holdings to Vance's lawyer. David looked down at the papers. He picked up the photograph, his fingers tightening on the edges. "What is this, Chloe?" he asked, his voice low. "It's not what it looks like. That's a client. He's a developer. We talk business." I opened the blue binder to the tab labeled Evidence of Coercion. I slid out the photographs I had taken of the forged power of attorney documents she had presented. "She brought me these last week. They are forgeries, designed to grant you power of attorney, with clauses that would allow you to sell this house without a court order. She pressured me to sign them while pretending I was unwell. David took the photos. He read the highlighted sections. His face, always so open, began to shut down, layer by layer. The confusion hardened into a dawning, horrific comprehension. He looked at his wife. "You asked me if we should be concerned about Mom's memory. You talked about St. Teresa's gardens. You brought this up." "I was concerned," she cried, tears springing to her eyes. They were real tears of fear, not performance. "For her, for us, this house is a burden, David. It's an anchor. We could have the money to start fresh, to have a real life." "By stealing from my mother?" His voice was a whisper, broken. "It wouldn't be stealing. It would be managing the asset. She wouldn't need it anymore." The words tumbled out, a confession wrapped in warped logic. David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping back. He walked to the kitchen window, his back to us. His shoulders were rigid. The only sound was Chloe's ragged breathing. "The debt is real?" he asked the window. "Yes," I said. "The transfers to this Crestview thing?" "Yes." "The meetings with Vance?" "Yes." He turned around. The pain on his face was a physical thing. He looked at Chloe not with anger, but with a devastated pity. "You lied to me. For years. You were using me to get to my family's home." "I love you," she implored, the words desperate. "You love the life you thought my family could buy you," he said, the statement flat and final. "You need to leave. David, please, get out of this house, now." His voice held no room for argument. It was the voice of a man whose world had just been dismantled. Chloe looked at him, at the finality in his eyes. The fight left her. She picked up her leather folder, her hands shaking. She did not look at me. She walked out of the kitchen. We heard the front door open and close. A moment later, her car started and drove away. The silence she left behind was vast. David sank back into his chair. He put his head in his hands. I sat down across from him. I did not speak. I let him feel the weight of it. After a long time, he looked up. His eyes were red. "How long have you known?" "Since the day I overheard her on the phone." She whispered, "Just a few more months and everything will be ours." He flinched. "And you didn't tell me." "I needed proof. I needed to protect the assets so that even if she convinced you, she could not succeed. I have placed everything in an irrevocable trust for you. The house is safe. The money is safe. She cannot touch any of it." He absorbed this. "You protected me, even when you thought I might side with her. You are my son. My job is to protect you, even from mistakes you might make while blinded by love." A tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek. He wiped it away with a rough hand. "I am so sorry, Mom. I was blind. I let her manipulate me. I questioned you." "You were supposed to trust your wife," I said. "There's no shame in that. The shame is hers alone." We sat in the quiet kitchen. The afternoon light lengthened across the floor. The crisis was over, but the healing would take time. In the weeks that followed, David moved into the guest room. He began seeing a therapist. He served Chloe with divorce papers, citing fraud and irreconcilable differences. Using the evidence we had, her lawyer advised a quick, uncontested settlement with no claim to David's future inheritance. Robert Vance, when a copy of the evidence was sent anonymously to his partners, quietly dissolved Crestview Holdings and ceased all inquiries on our street. One evening in late summer, David and I were in the backyard weeding the garden together. The roses were in full bloom. The tomatoes were heavy on the vine. "Alma and Joyce are coming for dinner on Sunday," I said. "They're bringing peach cobbler." He smiled, a genuine, if still quiet, smile. "Good. I like having them around." I sat back on my heels, looking at the house. It stood solid and familiar in the twilight. It was no longer a fortress under siege. It was a home again. The legacy was secure, not just in a trust, but in the understanding between us. The vengeance was complete. It was not violent or loud. It was the quiet, total victory of truth over lies, of protection over predation. I had reclaimed my power by using my mind, my resources, and the law. I had protected my son and my home. The warmth I felt now was not the heat of anger, but the steady, enduring warmth of a fire that had been banked and saved, ready to light the way forward. We went inside as the first stars appeared, closing the door on the past and turning on the lights.